Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Yozalionsi from Grup 12 and I will um, present my presentation about the first topic, uh, the Webster influence on American spelling. It is a matter of common observation that American spelling often differs in small ways from that customary in England. We word honor, color, and a score of words without the U of the English honor, color, etc. We sometimes employ one consonant where the English write two, like traveler, traveler, wagon, wagon, etc. The differences often pass unnoticed, partly because a number of English spellings are still current in America, partly because some of the American innovations are now common in England, and in general because certain alternatives are permissible in both countries. Although some of the differences have grown up since Webster's day, the majority of the distinctly American spelling are due to his advocacy of them and the incorporation of them in his dictionary. Spelling reform was one of the innumerable things that Franklin took an interest in. In 1768, he devised a scheme for a new alphabet and a reformed mode of spelling, and went so far as to have a special font of type cut for the purpose of putting it into effect. Years later he tried to interest Webster in his plan, but without success. Indeed, Webster was not in the beginning sympathetic to spelling reform, but by 1789 Franklin's influence had begun to have its effect. In the dissertation of the English language published in that year, Webster admitted, "I once believed that a reformation of our orthography would be unnecessary and impracticable. It has been thought well to trace in some detail the evolution of Webster's ideas on the subject of spelling, because the most characteristic differences between British and American practice today are owed to him. Some of his innovations have been adopted in Britain, and it might be said in general that his later views were on the whole moderate and sensible. That's all from me. Thank you for your attention. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Webster influence on American pronunciation. Though the influence is more difficult to prove, there can be no doubt that to Webster are to be attributed some of the characteristics of American pronunciation, especially its uniformity and the disposition to give value to be unaccented syllables of word. Certainly, he was interested in the improvement of American pronunciation and said that his book should serve to that purpose. In the first part of his Grammatical Institute, which became the American Spelling Book, he said that the system is designed to introduce uniformity and accuracy of pronunciation into common school, that it was not without effect can, in one case at least, be shown. In the preface to that work he say, angel, ancient, the English pronounce angel, ancient, contrary to every good principle. Webster quotes Sheridan with approval to the effect that a good articulation consists in giving every letter in a syllable its due proportion of sound according to the most approved custom of pronouncing it, and in making such a distinction between syllables of which words are composite, that the ear shall, without difficult, acknowledge their number, and he adds the specific injunction. Let words be divided as they ought to be pronounced: cluster, habit, nostril, bishop, and the smallest child cannot mistake a just pronunciation. In the light of such precept and evidence of the of its practice, and considering the popularity of spelling bees among those of farmer generation, it seems certainly that not a little influence on American pronunciation is to be traced to the old blue blanket spelling book.
Pronunciation. The earliest change in the English language in America, distinguishing it from the language of the mother country, were in the vocabulary. This have already been mentioned from the time when the early colonists came. However, different gains in pronunciation began gradually to develop. This has been due in part to change that have occurred here, but has resulted still more from the fact that the pronunciation of England has undergone further change and that a variety of Southern English has come to be recognized as the English Reserve Standard. At the present time, American pronunciations show certain will mark difference from English use. Perhaps the most noticeable of these differences is in the vowel sound in such words as fast, path, grass, dance, cannot, hope. At the end of 18th century, southern England began to change from what is called a flat to a broad in this word that is from a sound like the um, in man to one like the in a father. Next, the most noticeable difference between English and American pronunciation is in the treatment of the R. In the received pronunciation of England, the sound has disappeared except before vowel. It is not heard when it occurs before another consonant or at the end of a word unless the next word begins with a vowel. In America, Eastern, New England, and some of the South follow the English practice, but in the middle states and the West, the R is pronounced in all positions. A more important difference is the greater clearness with which Americans pronounce an accent syllables. They don't say secretary or necessary, but the British commonly say the centenary and laboratory. An advertisement is never advertisement. There is, of course, more in speech than the quality of sound. There is also the matter of pitch and tempo. Americans speak more slowly and with less variety of tone. There can be no gainsaying the fact. The American speech is a bit more monotonous, is uttered with less variety in the intonation than that of Britain. Thank you.